And just a quick introduction. The voice you're hearing me, it's Julian. My name is Julian. You won't be seeing me on the video, but I am the program manager for the Living Cultures Grant Program. I'm based in San Francisco, and Jennifer is Jennifer Joy Jameson. She is the program manager for the Apprenticeship program, and she's helping on the other side this PowerPoint presentation. And so we'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar. We're going to go from 12 to 1. And the first thing we're doing here is just this welcome and introduction to ACTA. If you can go to the next slide, please, Jen. Mm-hmm. You can see here the topics for the day. Quick intro, and then what we focus on, our history, and then we'll delve into the two programs that we are promoting. And then we will also have, for each of these programs, a few minutes, maybe 5, to answer your questions. Okay, so if you have anything, you can either type them out here in the chat room. To the side, there's a little sidebar, or you can, voice them when we get to that part. And so we'll begin with the introduction to ACTA. If we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the Alliance for California Traditional Arts is a small nonprofit organization that works statewide to promote traditional and folk arts of all kinds of cultures residing here in California. We work from the Fresno area. We have a Fresno office. We work from Los Angeles and one office in San Francisco where I am based. And we have more than these two programs, but these are our major ones, the Apprenticeship Program and the Living Cultures Grant Program. We are celebrating a little bit more than 20 years activity and creating events and funding organizations and artists. And as you can see here in the slide, we provide advocacy, resources, and connections to artists and their communities. We would like to encourage you to visit our website. There's tons of information in there about the two programs we'll be talking about today, as well as other programs that you might be interested in. On that note, by the end of June, we should have a new and updated website for you to explore, and we would love to have you on there to check out and of course, to learn more about our programs. Next slide, please. So to begin, what are the folk and traditional arts? What we mean by this are those arts and practices that share a common heritage, that share a common language, religion, occupation, or region, that are based on collective wisdom and have shared aesthetics, and that affirm community, a sense of belonging. Next slide, please. And here's just an example, some pictures of different cultural communities that have worked with us, that we've promoted, including Pacific Islander, Native American, Asian traditions, Southeast, all kinds, Latino, Latinx, Latina traditions, also from all over the map, really. And you can also see here that some of these cultural practices involve material arts and culinary, like foodways, or dance and music. We really promote all kinds of genres. Next slide, please. Here's some examples from European and Middle Eastern. And also what we call occupational traditions, which, of course, every culture has its own occupational traditions, but we have here some examples of that. Leatherworking, quilts, instrument making, for example, too. Next slide, please. Some examples of the African diaspora. And again, we invite you to explore our website because that's where you'll find many, many more examples. Now, to delve into the Living Cultures Grants program, which is a program that I manage. Next slide, please. This is a program that's focused on community work. And in 2020, we'll be making approximately 40 grants of up to $5,000 each. This money can support your activities, your cultural events or practices, anywhere from January 1st, 2020, all the way to December, to the last day of the year. And proposals, we are now open to receiving your proposals from now until July 15th. And this is an important thing. We are people can submit online with our new online application, or it can also be done through the mail, through a hard copy by downloading a PDF of ours. We prefer that you submit online because that's a quicker way and a more organized way of receiving your materials. But if you truly prefer to do it through the mail, that's also acceptable. And once you turn in your application, by July 15th, notifications, if you're awarded or not, will begin notifying people early January 2020. Next slide, please. So a few considerations about this program, which we also call the LCGP for short. This program requires that you have an organizational budget of $250,000 or less each year. So these are for smaller organizations or for cultural groups as well. You don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit organization to qualify for this grant. You can be simply a cultural group in your community, but if you are, you have to secure a fiscal sponsor, someone who will receive the money and then pass it on to you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move along. But basically, the three pathways that we promote, as you can see here on the slide, are cultural continuity, sustainability, and engagement, strengthening communities. As you can see in this photograph, a lot of the artwork that we promote is strong in connecting people, usually intergenerational. You've got elders, adults, and children, and the passing on of these traditions. Also, the last consideration here is that we look for projects that will have an impact beyond the grant period. Next slide, please. So here's some more information about what we fund. I won't read through all of it since you can see it for yourself, but the form that the cultural event will take really depends on what you're proposing. It can be anything from classes to workshops to festivals. And this information you can find online. So I'll just move now to the next slide. But this information is part of the application in both online form and paper form. So you can read about this in more detail as you prepare to apply. So here is another slide kind of depicting, again, what the things that we do fund, that we do include, and including equipment for performances, equipment for dances or music, and including costumes as well. Next slide, please. And again, what we seek is to promote projects that are engaging and strengthening communities, as well as engaging others. So public presentations are welcome, but also exhibits and exhibitions that foster active participation. And one thing I will mention that we encourage here at ACTA is for you to reach out directly to myself or to Jennifer or to others in our team to talk about your project before applying. That way we can see if it's the right fit. And I should mention, I forgot to mention that in introducing ACTA a little bit, but we are a nonprofit that's composed of 13 people right across California. Just to give you a little background, Jennifer and I are just two of these 13 people. Next slide, please. So here's an important thing to consider, what we do not fund. So we don't fund general operating support for your organization. Also, as you can see here, projects whose main purpose is fundraising. Also, projects that limit to a historical emphasis, or projects that are based on an interpretation of a cultural tradition. And other things that we don't fund or we can't fund is out-of-state travel, one-on-one apprenticeships. For the Living Cultures Grants Program, we don't fund that, but for the apprenticeship program, that's specifically what it focuses on. And Jennifer will be talking to you about that a little bit. Another consideration is that we don't fund more than one proposal per organization, or proposals for multiple components of a single festival or event. And one important thing here is that if you are receiving grant money from the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, or the CERDNA Foundation, you are not eligible for the Living Cultures Grant Program. That's because those are our funders, so it would be sort of like double dipping, or it would be a conflict there. Okay, so moving on to the next one, please. And I see that Sabrina has a question here in the chat. We'll get to that in a second.
Whoops.
Okay.
Let's see which line you're on, Julian.
What's that?
Say something, Julian. I'm trying to mute everyone.
Can you hear me okay?
Which line you're on. Sorry. Can you say something? Okay.
Okay, I think you can hear me now, right?
If everyone can go ahead and make sure that they have muted themselves, just a quick technical note, if they can all please click the microphone and mute themselves if they are not speaking during the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Can you speak, Julian?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, so moving on to who is eligible. As I said earlier, nonprofit organizations, cultural groups without that designation, but that have a California-based nonprofit fiscal sponsor are eligible to apply. You have to earn less than $250,000 per year. And also, if you have received Living Cultures funding consecutively in the last 3 years, we ask you to sit 1 year before applying. Okay. Next slide, please.
Budget.
So, when we receive your application, the first thing that happens is that the program manager, myself, I review this, make sure it's complete, and I work with you to make sure that's finished. Now, I should stress that this is before the July 15 deadline. Ideally, if we would have by then a finished, complete application. So it's always better to start before and not leave things to the last minute. But once it's finalized, this application is then sent to panel review made up of experts, cultural experts, and people who know these cultural practices very well and who are very familiar with the California landscape, cultural landscape. And so this is the panel that decides which applications will be awarded and which won't for the year. Once that happens, These recommendations are sent to our board of directors, and they're the ones that finally decide. They approve or not these recommendations of awardees. Once those are approved, and that happens around December, we then communicate with you early January to let you know. Okay. And so there is, there's another question by Vani.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So just a few more words on this. This is a very friendly process. Both Jennifer and I are happy to talk to you about your project and even, questions you may have along the process. We're here to help out. And we welcome first-time applicants as well. So in terms of the review criteria, this is the criteria that the panel that's going to review your application is looking for. We're looking for these elements, as you can see here on the screen. Okay? And our application itself, if you haven't seen it yet, asks you a question about these things. It asks you, for example, to tell us about your cultural tradition and to tell us what is important in the community, for instance. And that speaks to community support, for example. Okay? So these are the 5 things that you'll be scored on. Your application will be scored on. And I will say that in this process, there's a lot of back and forth, and there's different perspectives coming in. But the key is to have just the strongest application possible, and taking it from there. Next slide, please. So I talked about the review process. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is an important thing, right? We are now, for the first time in 13 years, the application is completely available online. And we do encourage you to do that. And we'll be talking a little bit about this at the end of the presentation. And we'll be actually showing you what that application looks like, a small preview of that. Okay? As I said, also just remember, if you don't want to do that online, it's perfectly fine. And you can download a hard copy, a PDF, from our website, fill that out, and send it to us by mail. Okay. Next slide, please. The application. So there is a proposal cover page which asks of you to provide us with contact info, some basic stuff about your organization or cultural group. And then there's a narrative that's quite important. The narrative is a set of questions that prompt you to tell us about your cultural practice, about your community, about what this artwork is doing, the functions of it. And so this is a set of questions from A to I, A, B, C, and onward. And it might seem like a long part of the application. It's probably the longest for sure, but it's also the most enriching because this is the chance for you to tell us with detail what you're proposing and why we should fund this, right? Why is this important? And I will say that new this year is that each of these questions from A to I has a word limit of 300 words, which can be tricky, but I think it's also enough to get your message across. So moving on from the narrative, there's a budget telling us, how this money is going to be spent, also what kind of other support you're getting. There's also organizational budget, which is a broader sort of view of what your organization is making and how much, what it uses it for. Then there's letters of community support. This is one mandatory letter, but you can submit up to 2, telling us directly from people who are impacted by your project and who support it. Then we also ask you if you're a nonprofit organization to submit your tax-exempt status, proof of that, or tribal status. And if you're not, if you're a cultural group working with the fiscal sponsor, we ask you to submit your fiscal sponsor's proof. Lastly, we ask you to submit work samples and descriptions of these samples. These are very, very important because the review panel is going to be looking at these, and it really gives us a clear perspective of this artwork and your community. Lastly, there is also a section about supplementary materials. This can be, for example, a brochure of your festival that you did last year. Again, this is all to help your application be stronger. Next, please. Okay, like I said, project budget, $5,000, maximum we award. There's an example of a project budget in the application. Next, please. And here's a quick sample of that. This is available in the application itself, so I won't spend too much time on it now. Next, please. Okay, the important thing here to remember is that July 15, 2019 is the submitted or postmarked deadline. And like I said, we'll be notifying people, awardees and non-awardees, in January 2020. And your project has to take place between January 1st and December 31st, 2020. Next, please. Okay. So you have my contact info here on this slide. That's my direct office number, my email. And I should say that I do speak Spanish. So if you have any questions or want to talk in Spanish,
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Julian.
no problem. Okay, so we have about 4 minutes for questions, and I see that we have things here already.
Let's have everyone type their questions in the chat box, just because it is a little loud to unmute everyone.
Okay, good. That's a good idea. And also, I'll just start with the questions that have already been asked, right? Sabrina is asking, can we submit proposals for multiple events? And the answer is no. We ask that for each organization, it's one event or one project. We also, or rather, multiple proposals for different events. Again, the question is that no, we actually, it's just one organization for each event, even if you're doing multiple ones. Vanny had a question regarding application. Is it online or mail-in? It is available in both formats. We prefer you do it online, but there's absolutely no consequences if you do it through the mail. It's going to be evaluated the same. Like I said, it's just a speedier process if you do it online, and it's more organized, to be honest as well. Denise had a question. Can a program using a fiscal sponsor and their fiscal sponsor apply for separate grants? Yes. What this means is that the fiscal sponsor would be serving as your fiscal sponsor for your organization, but they can also apply for their own event. We don't disqualify them for that. They would be considered another applicant. Someone, and is asked about how about the apprenticeship program. That's coming up right after me. And Kevin has a question. What type of media do you accept for work samples? This is a great question. We accept YouTube videos, Vimeo videos online. We also accept photographs. And anything else, Jen, that I'm forgetting?
You can also, I believe you can also upload video if it's not housed on YouTube or another platform. You can also just upload video directly. But yeah, images, video,
MP3s,
audio samples, yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on the needs of the project.
Yeah, and then OK had also said if we can talk about the apprenticeship, that's coming up right after me. A few minutes. Guest number 12 says, if we received a grant last year from ACTA, is this considered funds from the Cerna Foundation, Walter and Elise House Fund, etc.? So if you received from last year, it's not. The only thing that we care about is that if you have received ACTA funding for 3 years consecutively in a row, for your fourth one that you don't apply, so that you take a break 1 year, and then you can reapply. So that's the only thing we are concerned about. Kevin is asking another question. Where can we learn about previous awardees? Great question, Kevin. Our online presence, our website, actually, if you go to the Living Cultures Grants Program web page, but if you click on that, you'll see both the online application portal. It's not a portal, really. It's just a link, actually. And to the sides of that, you will see a list of previous awardees. And this is actually a great way to learn about what kinds of projects we fund. Okay? Peter, can you expand on the slide about budgeting? Sure. Budgeting. So the slide that we showed, put up here 1 second.
I'm just showing this is where you can see the awardees from last year.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
So we ask for two budgets for living cultures. Okay, this is specifically for living cultures. We ask for 2 types of budgets. Project budget. Okay. This is asking, for example, asking us to list your income, your total income for the project, and your total expenses for the project. Okay. So the sample budget that we have online, I don't know if you can pull it up, Jen. Do you mind going to
on
that slide real quick?
Submittable?
No, just on, there's a sample budget on our PowerPoint.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. So as you can see here, the first part is income, and it asks you to put, active requests as $5,000. And then other sources that you are counting on or are expecting to receive for your project. So if this is a small project that's like less than $5,000, then that's all you put on there. But if this is a little bit bigger and it's going to cost you more and you're considering other incomes, this is where you would just put the name of the source to your left, the money you're expecting or that you're wanting or needing. And then for rationale, we actually call it now budget notes, is where you would put, like in this example here, in case of tuition for classes, right? Your organization makes $4,800 and it charges, $10 times 40, participants. So it's like an example of that. And if you want, Peter, I can gladly answer more questions about budgeting through a phone call or an email if this isn't quite clear, but I hope I answered some questions. I guess the last one really quickly. Can you give an example of a project that this grant would not fund, specifically in regards to projects based on interpretation of a cultural tradition? Great question, Megan. I'll do it just really quickly. I think that what we mean by that is if Jennifer and I, as coworkers, we also say we are both also artists, like musicians, and we wanted to propose a project to ACTA, about folk circus music, and her and I, our project consists of learning a lot of circus songs from the internet or even from circus performers, and then we want to perform those songs in a festival. That is what we mean by projects based on the interpretation of a cultural tradition. Since her and I are not part of that culture, we're not part of that cultural group or tradition directly, we would not qualify for an ACTA grant. Does that make sense, Megan? And I'll leave it at that because now we're moving into apprenticeship program, which Jennifer will take over. But I can gladly answer more questions at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julian. You all can hear me okay? Julian, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited to hear that folks were itching to learn about the apprenticeship program. But yeah, so the apprenticeship program is act as opportunity to foster the growth of individual artists. So artists not working with the 501c3 nonprofit, but are really kind of developing and furthering their own practice. And it's really centered on stewarding really lasting and meaningful cultural transmission between a master artist, an artist who has really been understood within their community as someone who's really kind of met a level of excellence in the practice, and is really a tradition bearer and holds quite a lot of knowledge to share and transmit onto a proficient apprentice, an apprentice who already has some ground level understanding and practice within a chosen, a particular cultural expression, to really kind of further and advance that really valuable knowledge and build it out and establish more cultural sustainability across generations and communities. So who can apply? This is a really neat program because the master and the apprentice really self-select. So if you are, say, an elder in, say an elder mariachi who really kind of, wants to really make sure that the new generation of mariachis is really picking this up, and you have someone within your community who can play and who really wants to steward and deepen that knowledge. Those two folks would then apply together as master and apprentice. Similarly, if you're more of an apprentice and are proficient in a form but really are looking to deepen it, you might look around, see within or a little beyond your own community, and think who really has the knowledge that I need to really excel and to really kind of deepen my understanding in the practice, and build a relationship there. So, but again, the application is a co-application between the master and the apprentice. So there's a lot of communication between the two in developing the materials. The apprenticeship will fund a period of work, roughly at least 6 months of somewhat regularly working together up to the full 2020 calendar year. So again, we're applying for the 2020 calendar year, and it's really self-designed curriculum. You all kind of establish your timing. Are you meeting together once a week for 2 hours? Are you meeting together every 2 weeks for a few more hours than that? It's really self-identified, self-selected, and to kind of suit your needs and the form as well. But we do need apprenticeship teams to be working together at least 6 months, and they can take up to the year to work together as well. The artist must be residents of California, and the master artist, who will be the recipient of the funds, needs to be authorized to work in the U.S. These are some examples of ineligible apprenticeships. I'll skip down to the bottom first. If you were funded in the 2019 apprenticeship program, we ask that you take a beat for at least 1 year before applying again. So those folks would not be eligible for 2020. But also contemporary studio crafts or the reproduction of antiques. It's not quite what we're trying to support here. Recreations of historic or village folk traditions that attempt to reenact lifestyles from the distant past. So we're really talking about living traditions, living and changing and shifting cultural heritage and cultural expressions here. A similar review process, apprenticeship teams will apply. We'll then ensure that every application is eligible to then move to panel review. And we are always bringing in really dynamic cultural practitioners, scholars, community leaders that really have a deep understanding and knowledge of the art forms and the cultures represented in the applicant pool, to then review and make recommendations on which applications will receive funding. Then we take that to our board of directors. They make an approval, and then we will begin notifying folks at the very start of January. Here's some of what we're looking at when panelists are reviewing an apprenticeship application. They're looking for the traditionality. Is this something that is passed down within community, within either intergenerationally or person to person, or is this something that you learn at a fine arts institution, right? So we're looking for that community-based knowledge. Of course, we're looking for artistic quality, and the way to share that out most effectively is through your work samples, and we'll talk about that. Commitment and skill. So, especially thinking about an apprentice, a good apprentice is coming to the table with a fair amount of proficiency already in the particular form. So it's not a beginner's, it's not suitable for beginners. It's suitable for folks who already can sort of speak the language of the art form and are really in a position to really deepen that knowledge through this one-on-one study. Shared community membership. So if you are, Julian sort of alluded to this, but if you are applying for a particular, cultural form, but neither of you are existing within that cultural framework, it doesn't quite have legs for an ACTA application. And we can always talk more about that and hear your ideas, or and really kind of figure out what's the right positioning for an ACTA application. But that is an important thing if we're talking about meaningful community-based cultural transmission. Feasibility of the application. So for instance, if the master artist is in San Francisco and the apprentice is in San Diego, that would be challenging. It's certainly not impossible, but logistically that would be much more challenging than if they were in the same city or a county over or something like that. So that's something to consider also. And then urgency. So this doesn't apply across the board, but certainly if there is an endangered art form, and really this is an essential knowledge that needs to be transmitted effectively, that is a consideration as well. The application, again, this is a mutual application. So you all will both, have some basic information that you share, who you are, what the form and what the sort of focus of your apprenticeship is, and then you also respond to questions directed to the master artist, and then questions directed to the apprentice. You'll share out work samples. So again, this is really important to be thoughtful about. So for instance, if you're a dancer, you want to make sure to send a video that doesn't cut off your feet, right? You just want to make sure that you're sending within your means the best, most effective work samples, video, audio, photo, and depending on the form that you're applying for, there are specific directions in terms of what kinds of work samples we're looking for. As always, just give us a shout if you have questions about that. Letters of support. We need one letter of support for both the master artist and the apprentice. You can apply with up to 2 letters of support for master artist and apprentice, but we need at least 1 letter accounting for the readiness and the mastery of each artist. Optional support materials, you're welcome to submit extra media, news clippings, if you like as well. And the budget is $3,000. So the $3,000 goes directly to the master artist in 3 installments. And within that $3,000, folks can, the team can decide to budget for materials or tools that they need out of that 3,000, or they can budget for, say, mileage or travel reimbursement, say for the apprentice to get to the master artist studio or house within that 3,000. But the 3,000 goes directly to the master artist. And here's a good visualization of what a budget might look like. So typically we ask for at least $1,000 to go to the master artist fees, but you can definitely identify materials that you might need and travel support that you might need within that 3,000. But really it's up to the master and apprentice to then kind of manage that on their own once the money is received by the master artist. Timeline. Again, same timeline as Living Cultures, July 15, 2019. So that's the date that we need to have your online application submitted by the end of day. I believe it ends at midnight, but really it's best practice to probably submit at least a day ahead so there's no funny technical difficulties. Or if you're sending hard copy, we need to see that the application has been mailed on July 15th. Again, we'll notify you early January 2020 so that you can get started right away. From January to December, you've got the full year to embark on your work together. Okay, we want you to stay connected with us. These are some ways that you can do that. You can subscribe to our monthly newsletter on our website. You, of course, can follow us on our social feeds and just give us a shout with any particular questions you have. And I'm sure that we've gotten some in the chat box, and we'll take a minute here to respond to some apprenticeship questions. Here's our general office contact information. But apprenticeship-specific questions, you can direct them specifically to me. I'm based out of our Los Angeles office and will be your point person for any apprenticeship questions. So are there any out there, Leon?
We do have some questions, and I also
Hi,
was going to
this is
suggest...
Parvati here.
Oh, yes. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to suggest that for those that are calling in and can't type, they might have some questions to voice. So I don't know if you'd like to go with either one first, but there are some questions that are typed out.
Let's take the voice calls first. Yeah.
Which ones?
The voice calls?
Okay. So if anyone has a question and would like to speak up, we can unmute, right? Will you do that, Jen?
Okay. I'm a little scared it's going to be loud.
It's going to be a lot of... There's going to be a lot of people talking.
We can try. Okay. Okay. Ooh, we've got lots of questions. Maybe that does make more sense. I'm sorry, y'all. We're getting our bearings here. Maybe it does make more sense to respond to typed questions first, just to kind of...
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
follow the format.
So typed questions. Janice Leon Guerrero is asking, what if the master is part of their own 501c3?
So that's an interesting question. Generally the funds should go directly to the master as an individual. So the only other case, I'm unfamiliar with sending funds to a 501c3. Occasionally we'll have a master artist who has an LLC, like an individual sort of sole proprietor business that will then, kind of send the resources to via the LLC. But I'm not sure about 501c3. I might need to check on that. I want to say that might not be the best avenue. Yeah, but feel free to give me a shout and we can suss that out in more detail.
Okay, Vanny has a question. Can the master be her own teacher?
say that again?
Can the master be her own teacher?
This is really meant to be a team of two. This is really meant to be a team of two. So if I'm understanding that question, I would say no. It's really about um, one-on-one transmission between two folks. We want to kind of spread the knowledge a little wider than just one artist.
Okay, this is Vanny still asking the same another question. What is the usual acceptance rate on apprenticeship?
It's a good question. We have typically been getting about 45 applications a year and are able to fund between 15 and 17 pairs per year. So certainly we wish we could fund more. There's so many excellent applicants every year that we would love to fund more. But that's sort of where we are in terms of our funding level. So hopefully that gives you a good sense.
Okay, another question. What is the panel looking for in the application for it to stand out in the pool? Also from Vanny.
Yeah, work samples are so important. It's so important to be really thoughtful and strategic about the samples. I think being really clear with us, like if you're sending us a video, send us exactly the minute or two that you want us to really make sure to watch. If you're sending images, make sure that they're well lit. Certainly, we do not expect or need professional quality or studio images or anything like that. But just a little care and thought on the work samples can go a long way in really communicating the excellence of your work and the readiness of the apprentice and so forth. And of course, I think that expressing the long-term impact beyond just the master and apprentice, but what impact might this connection have on the community of practice even beyond the pairing? So why is it essential that this master artist and this apprentice work together? What will it do to the wider community? I think that can be an important thing to express as well.
Okay, Janice has another question. You mentioned the money can be used for apprentice to travel to the master. I'm assuming it can also be used the other way, right? For the master to travel to the apprentice, correct?
Yeah, in that case, it's really just about utilizing, the $3,000 that the master artist gets in a way that suits the work. So, the money is going directly to the master artist. If the apprentice needs reimbursement, it's up to the master artist to essentially, transmit that money directly to them. It's really up to you all within the $3,000 budget how you want to spend the money as a team. But again, we're not cutting checks to apprentices. The funds go to the master artist.
Okay. We have two questions that are quite similar, one from Anya and the other one from Danielle. I'm going to combine them just in terms of time, but can you explain more about the shared membership of the community? And can you speak to shared community in terms of occupation and if that is considered the cultural community?
Yeah, occupation is a really unique area. I think with ACTA, shared cultural membership in a community most often looks like shared ethnic or regional membership in a community. So for instance, we see here on the screen shared membership within the South Asian community between master and apprentice. But occupational applicants are coming to it from a slightly different framework, right? So the community of practice is shared membership as ranchers, as fishermen, as fisher people, I should say. Other kind of occupation-centered cultural practices that might have expressive traditions within them. So you might not be coming from the same ethnic background or even maybe the same regional background, right? but you do share a cultural framework in the occupational form.
Hey, Vanny has a question. Can a master artist also bring an expert once in a while as part of the budget?
Um, I would say no. The master is really positioned as the knowledge keeper. With that said, we do encourage apprenticeship teams to really kind of spend their time in really holistic ways, right? So it's not just about time in the studio, in the home studio, wherever it might be, together working on the practice. It's also about, taking time together to, say, go see other performances from other practitioners that might inform and deepen that learning process, or, share meals, or do research, together. But generally, the funds are meant to support and honor the work and the labor of the master artist in transmitting this knowledge to an apprentice.
Connected to that, Vanny was also saying that it is still one-on-one with her own teacher within this context. But
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
so related to the previous question, about bringing someone else into that apprenticeship, apart from the master artist and student, if well, I guess you answered the question. Really, it's really just a one-on-one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are occasional instances where there might be an art form where there might be more than one apprentice. That's a rare occasion, and it sort of is related to if there's a particular art form where it just simply does not make sense to transmit that knowledge one-on-one. There can be more than one apprentice, but not more than one master for this opportunity.
Another question by Parvati. Will ACTA be sending a 1099?
Yes. So yeah, it's an independent contract. The master artists are independent contractors. So yes, you will get a 1099. Great question.
Okay. Vani asks, are the funds of the master artist taxable for them?
So my understanding, I'm no tax expert, but if you're receiving a 1099, it's untaxed funds. So you might need to account for paying taxes on the funds later on. Of course, we do know that some people will then write off travel expenses or materials expenses if they do allocate funds out of that $3,000 for those expenses.
Okay. Anya has two sets of questions. Does this shared community mean outside of the artistic community which they share? For clarification, living in the same artistic culture here in the Bay Area would count as shared community?
Can you repeat it one more time? I'm sorry.
Does this shared community mean outside of the artistic community which they share? For clarification, living in the same artistic culture here in the Bay Area would count as shared community?
I think it can. I think I would probably need to know more specifically about this idea, and we can talk through it in more detail, but it can, yeah.
Okay. Okay has a question. Should the master show this in their tax return? I think this income, right, basically?
Yes, it is contract income, yeah. So you would manage that reporting yourself. We don't need a final report on how you spend your funds. We do have a final report process, but it's more reflective than accounting for the funds. But yeah, it would be up to you to report that.
Danielle asks, are there age requirements? What if the apprentice is older than the artist?
We have had that. There are no hard age requirements. It's really about is this someone who really has important and demonstrated excellence and deep knowledge of a particular form or expression, and is in a position to really pass it on effectively? And is the apprentice ready, proficient, and is it going to be an impactful period of work together? And the idea obviously also is that it becomes like a lasting relationship, hopefully, right? Oftentimes, masters and apprentices have been working together for a few years, if not longer, beforehand, but some are really still kind of getting to know each other. But we really are hoping that this will be a lasting mentorship relationship, just beyond the apprenticeship program. And we've also had returning pairs come back to focus on a different technique than they explored in the first time, or we'll have master artists come back with different apprentices. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, so there's still about 6 questions in the chat box, but it is 12:56.
Yeah.
I don't know what you'd prefer to do, Jen.
Gosh, I think that to respect everybody's time, I think we need to probably go to the digital preview. And please do email me or call me with your question. You can just copy paste it, or maybe Julian, you can track those questions and the source, and we can respond accordingly, because we would love to learn more about what you have in mind.
Yes,
At this point, we're going to do a quick overview of the online application process. Here's our website. If you want to apply, the best way to find the application is to just click on the website. You'll see a link. Here's where you can access living cultures or apprenticeship information. Say you want to click on the apprenticeship. It will take you to this program page where you will see here's the direct link to apply online, or you can download the PDFs in English or in Spanish. If you're applying online, you will see this application. It's via a platform called Submittable. You'll be asked to create an account. The apprenticeship program is unique because, again, folks master and apprentice are applying together, so there needs to be a lot of collaboration on the application itself. But for the purposes of submitting the application, really it will need to be one person kind of copy and pasting and filling out every box so that it can be submitted just from one source. You'll see there's some general questions, and then you have information about the master artist. You have information then about the apprentice, and then you'll have some more reflective. Well, here's an opportunity to then submit work samples for the master artist and work samples for the apprentice. Depending on the format, the materials will be slightly different. Here's a place to upload letters of support. So you might want to get that going sooner than later so that you can upload the letters directly during the application. Another place for apprentice work samples here, apprentice letters of support, and then this is just gobbledygook here, but this is where these more reflective and descriptive questions are for both apprentice and master. Finally, you see a budget, and that's basically the apprenticeship application. Julian, do you want to overview this one?
Well, this one's a little bit longer just because we're dealing here with an organization or a cultural group, and so we will require a couple of budgets and questions. There's a similar structure. The important thing I think to remember is that if you will be applying online, the first thing you must do is register to use this service. It's, of course, free. You create a username and a password, which also allows you conveniently be able to start the application and save your progress. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that Jennifer and I would recommend is to constantly save your work as you're going through this, because as you can tell here by what Jennifer is showing us, it's a very long scroll. It's like one unit, basically. If you go a little bit slower there, maybe just... So yeah, there's different parts to the Living Cultures one, but it's a long scroll, and at the bottom is where you save your draft, as you can see there. Another thing to note is something very important, actually, for those that are still here on the webinar. This, if you go to the very top, Jennifer, could you, please? So here you've got the application, right? You can go to the introduction, please, at the top. Okay, right there, or a little bit lower. There you go. Okay, so as you can see here, this is where you're going to fill things out. But there is a link. It's in orange here. Complete application instructions. Can you click on that on another? You can just click on it there. This is important because it's going to take you to more instructions, and it's going to give you more feedback. Actually, some of this stuff here is also from our website and from our webinar that we provided, or we're providing now, as you can see. So this is a really important document meant to be read before applying and as you're applying. So it's for your information. Read it carefully, and of course, ask away. My job is to help applicants turn in the best possible application, and of course answer any questions. But a lot of answers actually are here. That's what I want to say. So as you can see, you can open this separately from the application, and you can...
Dave, what do you want to eat for dinner?
Read it back and forth. Well, that's all for me, but thank you, Jen.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and wrap. But thank you all so much for joining us, and I think you've got my contact info. I realized I didn't show that final. Yeah, you got my contact info. You've got Julian's, and we look forward to learning about your projects and your ideas. And good luck. Thanks, Julian.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Should we stick around a little bit longer or should we?
Oh, I guess we could. Yeah, we can stick around a little longer if people want to stay on, and we can ask more questions.
Because I've encouraged in the chat box, as some of you can see, or some of you might not be able to see this, but I encourage everyone to write us directly. For the apprenticeship, you'll write Jennifer, or for the Living Cultures, you'll write me with your questions. That might work better, but if some of you maybe are on the phone and haven't been able to voice their questions, I think this might be a good chance.
Yeah, perhaps there are questions specifically about the online application that we can field for folks who want to stay on a little longer. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself by clicking that microphone there. Does anyone have questions? Okay.
This is Raji.
Hi.
If I could ask, one quick question, but prior to that, thank you for the wonderful presentation, answering all the questions.
Great.
The question is, can the master be a non-resident? I know I was mentioned that it needs to be somebody authorized to work in the U.S., but for some of the art form, the student does need to work with a specialized person who is not a resident or somebody who doesn't live there, would that be okay to submit as long as the master comes here on a valid visa to come out here and do the mentoring?
Yeah, in general, we are really seeking to invest in California artists and cultural practitioners. So a good master artist would be someone who at least takes residence in California for a good chunk of the year, rather than visiting. I think we do need to see some form of residency, and of course, yeah, they would need to be authorized with a visa or social security number, whatever might whatever way we might be legally able to support with the contract. But we're really seeking to invest in California artists primarily.
Thank you. And I know that we asked quite a few questions about tax. So if the money is split between the master and the student, who should be filing the tax? Is it going to be split according to how much they split, or is it all up to the master to file, and are they supposed to be paying tax on it?
It was kind of breaking up, so I'm not sure I heard everything, but I think you were asking about if the master and the apprentice split the funds, if the apprentice would then be responsible to kind of claim it on their taxes. Is that your question?
Correct. And more often, at least in my case, the student or the apprentice is not somebody who is a dependent. So how would the tax filing work? And are they supposed to be actually even paying tax on this money?
We might need to hop on the phone and talk about it in more detail so I can make a really informed answer. Generally, we're not encouraging the funds to be like evenly split between, I guess you could, but I think we really want to support the master artists' time and effort in being the teacher essentially here. But ACTA makes the funds to the master artist, and at the end of the day, the master artist decides how the funds are spent. So if the master artist does then want to, reimburse the apprentice or reimburse the apprentice for tools or supplies, studio rental space, whatever it might be, they can do so and write those taxes off. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions about the online application? Any other questions?
So there's some here on the chat, but I think some of those that asked longer with us.
What's that?
So there are some questions in the chat, but I think that those that asked are no longer in the webinar.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a good space to wrap up and thank everyone. Give a shout if there's any other burning questions right now. But otherwise, we'll talk to you all individually.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
All
Have
right.
a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.